If you're in business, whether you're a private organisation or a not-for-profit organisation, whether you're arts and social, then you're going to be encountering a whole range of taxes. One of the taxes that most business owners will encounter in some shape or form is VAT. More specifically, a conundrum and a head-scratching exercise arises when we have VAT in a context where people act as agents on behalf of somebody else. I'm not talking about secret agents, by the way, but I'm talking about a business relationship. In this week's I Hate Numbers video, I'm going to be looking at agency, in particular with reference to VAT, how that's dealt with. I'm going to be looking at some of the things that you need to do to account for that VAT to make sure you don't fall foul of any rules and get into trouble with HMRC. Look at some record keeping requirements that are needed and making sure that you actually deal with that adequately, sufficiently, so you don't have any compliance or penalties that are going to be thrust upon your shoulders. Hi folks, my name is Mahmood. I am the proud founder director of the firm I Hate Numbers and author of the book of the same name. Now, for over 30 years, I've had a simple mission, and that's to help business owners make more money, and by money I mean making profit, reduce their financial anxiety, reduce their stress loads, reduce their tax bills, and make them have the business they aspire to. I've done that for thousands of business owners, and I'd like to do the same for you. Let's crack on with the video. Now, just as a bit of a spoiler alert, a bit of a bonus, by the way, check the show notes at the end, by the way, and there's a free webinar that I'm going to be holding on taking the stress out of tax returns. More of that towards the end of the video. Now, I think the first thing we need to look at is what do we mean by an agent? Now, I'm not talking about that secret detective type agency, that James Bond type agency, but an agent is a business as an entity, could be an individual or a company that acts on behalf of another party. So for example, if I relate that to my own personal circumstance, in I Hate Numbers, I act and my firm acts as an agent on behalf of our many clients. We will have conversations on their behalf with HMRC. We will collect money on their behalf for any tax refunds that goes into our client account, and we're acting on behalf of that third party. In the context of other situations where you might find that relationship, you could have a music manager who acts on behalf of their artists, arranging shows, arranging gigs, promoting the band, promoting the performer, helping them generate tickets, helping them generate interest, helping them get more record sales, and they will act as that intermediary. You could also have the contacts of art galleries who may be selling works of art on behalf of the artist. You can have situations where people sell art through shops. What they're doing is they're hosting, they're displaying those works, they're making those sales, but they're acting on behalf of the artist. The individual shop that makes those sales, the music manager, myself included, we're agents. Now, another term that we're going to throw in there is what's called the principal. So in one of the examples I've just quoted, the artist would be what's called the principal. Sounds very grandiose, doesn't it? And the person who's selling that work of art on behalf of the artist is the agent. Now, the problem comes sometimes is about how we account for that and what's the VAT situation itself. And that typically comes down to it depends. Now, in the context of agency and VAT, there are two types of agents you can be. You can either be what's called a disclosed agent, or you can be an undisclosed agent. Now, in the example of perhaps a shop, a business that's displaying works of art, selling it on behalf of the artist, if it's made apparent and it's made known to the buyer that they are acting on behalf of the artist, they're actually displaying those works of art, they want to make artists generate more income, and therefore they're going to keep a commission they're acting on their behalf. If that's clear between that individual and the customer, and also it's apparent and it's made apparent to the business, the individual shop and the actual artist, that's what's called a disclosed agency relationship. There may be some paperwork by there that reinforces that, more of that towards the end of the video. Now, an undisclosed agency relationship, where it's not actually apparent to the parties who actually is the actual main body in this relationship here. So if you are an undisclosed agent, then you're recognised as what's called the principal in that relationship. So the first thing to clarify is what type of agency relationship is going on. Now, the next thing to consider is what's the VAT situation. Now, if you are an undisclosed agent, you're seen as the principal. So the value of what you're selling, your supply, if we're going to use a proper VAT term, is on your shoulders. You have to charge the full VAT. You can also recover that VAT as well, by the way. If you're a disclosed agent, which is a more common situation, so that's an artist that's being represented by an emporium that's selling their works of art. It could be a band, it could be a performer who has a manager acting as their agent. What that means is that the VAT situation is slightly different. So therefore, any commission that's charged by the music manager, by the emporium, by the individual, then the VAT is due purely on the commission. The actual VAT on the value of the original supply is on the shoulders of the principal. Now that's all very well and good, but I've seen many situations before where, for example, a piece of art is being sold, perhaps a ticket to performance is being sold. So again, it's quite common in the theatre industry. What happens is the value of that transaction is recorded as a sale. VAT is effectively calculated on the total value of the sale, and that's completely wrong. If you are a disclosed agent, the VAT from your perspective is only due on your commission. And the key important thing here is when that transaction is captured in your records, when it's captured in your accounts, you must record that not as a sale, but effectively money that's owed to your principal. So if I Hate Numbers was selling a piece of art, or I was actually selling tickets to a performance, and I'm actually the box office, then in that situation, my commission as such is the thing that's liable to VAT. That's what I charge my principal. I've got to make sure that all the money that flows through my till, all the money that flows through my business activity is not recorded as a sale, but it's actually recorded as effectively a liability. You record that as either a creditor, that's money that's owed to that principal, and that money is then remitted net of any commission that's paid out. Now, there is still a responsibility on the part of the artist, the performer, perhaps the landlord if you're renting out commercial property, is that they must keep an eye on the value of that supply that's being made in case they have to then themselves register for VAT at some point. Now, a few other things, folks. Paperwork, documentation agreements is really critical. Therefore, when you are selling a piece of art, for example, through your business, if you're, for example, selling a performance, then it's clear that somewhere you've got to make it apparent that you are actually acting as the agent. Make sure you've got good records in there. Make sure any agreements you've got yourself between and the principal are well documented, laying that relationship out. If not, you're going to get yourself into a pickle. You're going to unnecessarily charge or not charge VAT appropriately, and things are going to be really awkward. Paperwork, good systems are really going to be the key here to making sure we don't get into hot water. Now, folks, I hope you found that useful. Obviously, if there's any questions coming out of that, please do drop me a line. And I've mentioned that there is a free webinar coming up. Now, I have been working in the area of tax and business finance for many, many years here. And tax return season is nearly coming to its conclusion, but there is still an incredible amount of people, for whatever reason, it could be they haven't had the time, could be they find the task overwhelming, who haven't yet filed their tax return. And what I like to do on an annual basis is to provide free support to those individuals who may wish to do it on a DIY basis or make them aware of what's going on. So if you check the show notes, register for a free webinar where I'll be going through what the main things you need to do in a tax return, the main items you can claim, any particular problems that might occur. It's a Q&A session included in there as well. And if you are finding yourself in a situation where you've got to pay tax, what do you do if you don't have the funds there available? This webinar is for artists, it's for self-employed businesses, it's even for individuals there who may not have a self-employed business but still have to produce and generate a tax return. Check the link, please register, and I look forward to seeing you at that point. Until then, folks, have a great week and see you on the other side.